So here's the wallet we're going to make today. It's the Cardinal Mini. I actually have a little engraved cardinal on there in the bottom pocket there. You can see it a little bit. I'll include that as an SVG so you can use it or not. You can fold the cash in thirds. It fits nicely in that little pocket. You can also put credit cards in there if you want. So this can hold a max of 8 cards or 6 cards and some bills. Or you could probably slide some or a card behind the cash if you want. But very minimalistic, very thin. I carried it today when I went shopping, and yeah, barely noticed that it was in my front pocket. So let's get started on building this. It's a fairly long video, but you can skip through the parts, and it's really an easy build, so I think you'll enjoy it. Today I'm going to show you how to print a pattern using Adobe Acrobat Reader. This is a PDF, of course. This is a sample pattern, but the principle is the same. I press Control P on the keyboard, brings up the print dialog, and mine is a Brother laser. I click on Properties, make sure it's A4 because that's what nearly every pattern that I put out is. If it's not, I will let you know, but I like the A4 because it's longer sheets. Here I choose bond paper, but you can probably choose plain if you have plain paper. I choose bond because I'm using cardstock. You don't need a high resolution, 300 is fine. These are just lines. Okay. And then in the page sizing and handling, you don't want fit, you want actual size. Because if you choose fit, it will not come out properly and your project will just be wrong. You might have a tiny little wallet because it resized it. So after you click print, I already printed it out. You want to measure the 25 by 25, make sure it is that correct dimension. And if it's not, then you're going to have to go back and print it again, make sure you had everything set up correctly. So that's the basics for printing a pattern, very easy. Let's get on to actually making the project that you purchased. We're going to go hit the leather room and I'll show you how to do that. So here I have the pieces already cut out. I used a laser cutter, the X Tool 40 watt S1. These are the pockets. So the inside of the pocket there, you want to sand it and also bevel it and then burnish it and dye it if you choose. So you only have to do all the pockets. You don't do the big outside part because you'll do that later when everything is assembled. So that's what I'm just doing, using 600 grade, or sorry, 600 grit sandpaper to sand all those. And then you want to make sure that your beveler is sharp. So here I am going to sharpen it. If you have one of these little jigs, it's pretty nice. I think I paid 20 or 30 bucks for it. I don't remember, from Rocky Mountain Leather Supply, not sponsored. And then you just do some back strokes on that. And then you use the rouge, jeweler's rouge or sharpening rouge. And then here I am beveling the edges. It's very difficult after you laser cut some leather to use a beveler. It's just makes it really crispy on the edges. So if you cut it by hand, it will be a lot easier. And I'm assuming that most of you will cut this by hand. And I'm doing, like I said, all the actually top parts of the pockets. And now here I have some Tokonol, 50% water, 50% Tokonol, with one of these bingo markers. I like these markers, but they leak on the sides. And if you use it on leather that's been dyed, it will dye the sponge and then it will carry over into your next leather project. So I kind of like to use my finger to put the Tokonol. Here's some Cordovan dye, I think. It's like a brown dye. I don't believe it's the professional dye or pro dye. I think it's just regular alcohol based, but you got to be really careful when you put the dye on because with veg tan it shows up and you can easily ruin your project or at least a piece when you're doing this. Okay, so here I'm just using this tool to scratch the leather because it's too smooth on the grain side. So you want to kind of rough it up. You can use sandpaper or you can use an X-Acto knife. I think I used an X-Acto knife because it was easier. This thing doesn't work that well, at least not on this leather. So here I am using the X-Acto knife. And you want to do all the holes that are on the grain side because it's real smooth and the glue won't stick. I'm using this Phoebing's leather glue. It's not like rubber cement. You only put it on one of the surfaces. I got a little bit too much there on the leather. And then you spread it out and it works really well. Once you press the leather together, use binder clips like I'm doing, and then use needles to align the holes. Remember, there's an extra hole on the left side on the top and the bottom. That's for the overstitch. So you'll figure it out once you like line it up. Just do a test. And I found out with this leather, because I made it damp with a sponge so that it wouldn't burn so much on the laser, that some of the leather, like the pockets, they shrunk. So they were a little bit off, but if you cut it by hand, you won't have that problem. And if you cut it by laser without wetting the leather, you won't have that issue either. But it still came out fine. I just ended up sanding the edges a little bit more. And I know this wallet looks kind of dirty, but it's because of the laser, making the edges kind of charred. So that's the big issue with the laser, is the soot you get even with the stitching holes. You can't use white thread because it will become gray. But this is more of a like prototype, my final prototype. And I wanted to use the laser just to make it quick to assemble this wallet. So here I'm just doing the same thing for the big pocket, spreading the glue. And obviously, if you want, you can skip this part on YouTube, just fast forward or whatever, or click on where you want to go. Just doing the same thing as the other pocket. Yeah, I was getting a little frustrated, like I said, with the size of the pockets. They weren't really matching up, but I verified the pattern and they're exactly the same size. So it's because I wet the leather, and I think when it dried, it shrunk a bit. So yeah, if I do this next time on the laser, I will leave the leather as it is, dry, and cut it that way. But I still prefer to do these things by hand because you get a much better product and you don't have to worry about that soot. So here I am letting it dry with the binder clips. It doesn't take that long, not even 5 minutes. And it's attached. And you can see the char marks there on the backside from the laser. I could actually reduce the power and probably wouldn't have those marks. And then you want to orient that pocket on the left like that, because that's going to hold the cash that is folded up. So I'm just checking it out, how it will bend over and everything. So same thing as the other pockets, you can put that on either side and then put this small pocket here for the bills on the right side, I think is preferred, but you can do whatever you want. And this is not folding a bill in half and sticking it in there. It's more like folding it in thirds. You can hold a few bills that way. And I just wanted something minimalistic and easy to carry. So if you look at the glue on the bottom there, you can see 4 holes. So don't put glue there. And also on the top right side, there's 2 holes. You don't want to put glue. And I see I went up a little bit, which I shouldn't have. But then I'm going to rub it off. Anyway, spread out your glue. You can see when you put the pocket on there where not to put glue. And I'm trying to remove it there. Not very successful, but same thing. Use some needles, use some binder clips, whatever you have to line it up and get it to stay, and let it dry for a few minutes. Or if you're using Aqualim or rubber cement, you would put the glue on both surfaces, of course, let it dry, and then put them together. This glue, I think, is a little bit more forgiving. So you're going to sew from here, and then you're going to sew from here. Okay. That's 1. It's 2, 3, 4, and 5. Alright, you can see that I finished stitching this. I started here. I doubled the thread, went all the way around. And when I went past this part, I doubled the thread, went all the way down here, doubled it, came back, and this is where I'm gonna cut it like that. And I have this. I'm going to melt the thread, and same with this one here. So here you can see that I'm beveling the entire outside edge. I've already sanded it. I didn't show that part. So make sure you sand it first to make your leather edges even. Make sure your beveler is sharp. Like I said, with the laser cut, it does make the edges kind of crispy, but if you cut it by hand, the beveling should be no problem. And do both sides, flip it over, and then do the other side when you bevel. Of course, here I'm putting the 50-50 water tokonol mix all around the edges. I'm using a paper towel to burnish it. It works actually pretty well. And like I said, I don't normally prefer to make a lot of things out of veg tan like this, the natural, because it picks up dirt, and anything you do, slight mistake or dyeing the edges, you slip once and you can ruin the whole project after all that work. That's one of the reasons I don't like using natural undyed veg tan, but I do love using veg tan as long as it's been dyed or I can dye the leather myself. So like I said, you got to be careful putting the dye on. Make sure you don't let it bleed over the edges because that will be very apparent. But I do like the look of natural veg tan.